Hey everybody, Matthew Elmican here for the Old Plain Partnership for Integrated Conservation, and I took a trip abroad, and when I say abroad, I went across Highway 13 to Marathon County. We're still in the limits of what we'd like to call Seatown, otherwise known as Colby, otherwise known as the home of soon-to-be Wisconsin State cheese. But anyway, I digress. So what we're looking at right now is not a hayfield, not a new seeding field. This is actually an interseeded field from last year. So we put we collectively, our EPPIC farmer put in companion crops in here. And this was done with a homemade interseeder. They took a grain drill and they maneuvered some stuff and they seeded it directly. And this was done at V2, V3. And this is what came up this spring. So let's just dive right into it. So when somebody tells me, like, I want an interseeding mix that has spring green, yeah, this is what we shoot for. Granted, we got some blank spots. Could have been from various things. Heavy traffic area. But then you can see that for the most part, it is outstanding. So what do we want to look at? Well, I figured we would go over just a little bit some of the things that we're seeing below the ground from this interseeding, but maybe what we'll start off with is let's take a tutorial about identifying interseeding species, companion crop species, because some of you are like, hey, I have some stuff coming up this spring. I'd like to know what it is. So, this little guy is medium red, our perennial red clover. And we know that it's a medium red because of this distinct white band. And it has a rather kind of slightly elongated clover. Now, if this was more circular and more of a Kellier green instead of this, I don't know, green, that would be crimson. And then this thing that looks like hair, this is annual ryegrass. Which this is really interesting, is that I've never seen this much annual ryegrass come firing through before. But I guess somebody would say that even though we had some really cold temps during a winter that was technically a mild winter, but quite honestly, when you have this much biomass and interseeding species interacting together, and I've said that before and I've observed it many times, they kind of pick each other up. So we see that that bad boy is doing his thing. And then right here, this is dwarf Essex rape. There's very few of these guys. These will survive a mild winter, but they all don't come back. And we know that this is a dwarf Essex rape plant because we see the stalk. This is very trait. So this plant got ran over or chopped, something. Either way, it got knocked down and then it got back up again, just like the Chumbawamba song tells us. And we also know it's dwarf Essex rape because it has this very distinct green color, like an emerald green. And it's a very soft leaf. And it's mostly absent of distinct bumps or any other kind of texture. So we know that that's dwarf Essex rape. Now this guy, there's quite a few of these guys. But Matt, you just showed me this one. No, I didn't. See how that's a different color green? That's like the Kelly green, as I like to call it. This is 7-top turnip. And we know this is 7-top turnip because right there. It's got a very distinct tuber, is 80% to 90% drive. And when you yank it, it's going to have like gnarly roots underneath. And also we know that it's 7-top because it'll always have these distinct bumps. And then when it is in its early form, like summertime, it'll have hairs and little spikes on it. But for some reason, when it comes firing back in the spring, the only way you can tell that it's 7-top is, one, it'll have these like rigid collars right here, and it'll be distinct and purple. And then it turns into this white tuber with, quite honestly, it can be any kind of root system underneath. And then it'll have this different green and it'll have these bumps. It's almost like it's if it wants to form little spikes, and you can kind of see them in the sunlight. But there's a lot of this guy, and you can tell that he just wants to get something done, am I right? So he's actively growing. So how this soil is interacting with this no-till ground? Well, we have various root systems all interacting simultaneously. We got deep driving roots. I would dare say this probably went a little bit further before I snapped it off. But we got super fibrous, deep driving down roots from the annual ryegrass. We got plating, busting up tubers and nutrient sequestering storage capacity from the 7 top, plus very adaptive roots where it's going to find every nook and cranny and just eat the plating away. And then we also have, you know, something that's going to aggressively stimulate that top 3-4 inches right where the seed bed is going to be for your next primary crop, right? In these clovers. And this is also why this is important to have perennials or winter survivability in your interseeding mixes, is because if somebody wants to, like, well, I want nitrogen in my interseeding for my corn, well, the only way you're going to get that is if you let these things do their job. And the only way they can do their job is if you let them alone, let them fire back through in the spring, and let them get big so they can make these. Look at all that cheddar. The nodules. Nitrogen sacks. But anyway. So how does that ground look, Matt? Well, it's very kind of interesting. So when you look at this pile, you're like, wow, look at that. It's like potting soil. Absolutely. With that green action, the stimulation to the soil biome is outstanding. We see roots in every nook and cranny going every which way. This thing looks like fudge. And we see excellent rooting of the humble earthworm. And he's doing it for free. When we pop this thing open, we can kind of see that we still have some plating. We're in a dairy system. We're in a silage system. So we have manure. We have silage. We always get a lot of traffic. But you can see that when I take this, it doesn't take anything. And it just breaks into pieces in my hands seamlessly. And also we can see that the roots are just pulverizing it. So when you grab it, you get that. So somebody could say, like, when they dig it up, it didn't do anything, it's so blocky. Yeah, but when you look to see that there's roots everywhere, even though this is soft to the touch, it is amazing how strong this stuff is. And how this basically has transformed this really tight, continuous no-till ground into prime real estate. It is excellent moisture. We're seeing cracking on the top from the heat, but you can see that it is not bone dry and we're not kicking up dust. That's the other thing is everybody forgets. When you want to dig worms to go fishing, you don't just dig out in the middle of an open field. You got to find where they're eating. And that's no different than the same concept here when it comes to agriculture. We know that worms have a benefit. And we know if large species like worms have a benefit, that means that there's smaller things like fungi and other beneficial bacteria that benefit too. And the only way that they can get fed is if there's something that drive it. And the only way that they drive it is if they collect. Oh, I was going to point at the sun, but I just went down. Collecting sunlight. So it's not foo-foo fairy tale stuff here. Sun is out. Guns are out. They capture the sunlight and they drive that energy into the ground, creating roots, creating food, capturing moisture, doing a whole bunch of cool stuff. That's all I had to share for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. But I'm going to go. If you like this video, hit the little like button, share it with all your other internet friends, and we'll check you later.